Detecting and responding to threats in the cloud is harder than doing it on-prem. Even when you do have the visibility you need, legacy security workflows weren't designed for the speed and complexity of cloud environments. Cloud-native security solutions from ExtraHop are purpose-built to spot threats across the hybrid attack surface, provide detailed investigation steps, and help you automate response. Request your 30-day free trial at securityweekly.com/ExtraHop. Welcome back, everyone, to Enterprise Security Weekly. Learn how pen testing reduces risk, which really comes down to actually acting on the results. Someone on Twitter pointed that out, that pen testing doesn't actually reduce risk. Taking action on the findings reduces the risk. And we'll talk about all that and more with Core Security, a help systems company. You can register at securityweekly.com/webcast, and you get 1 CPE credit per webcast, and find our archive of previous webcasts on securityweekly.com/on-demand. Gerald Beuchelt is here with us. He's the Chief Information Security Officer at LogMeIn. He is responsible for the company's overall security, compliance, and technical privacy program with more than 20 years of experience in information security. He's a member of the board of directors of the IT sector chief for the Boston chapter of InfraGard. Gerald, welcome to the program.
Hi, Paul. Pleasure meeting you.
Nice to meet you as well. Thanks for coming on the show. Today, we wanted to talk about the security challenges when working from home, which I believe you have a very unique perspective on, given your role at LogMeIn.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's definitely been an interesting journey over those last couple of weeks in particular. At LogMeIn, we obviously do a lot of remote working tools. We have GoToMeeting, we have Rescue, we have all these kind of things going on. And as such, we've been reasonably well prepared with regards to taking our own from a maybe 50%-ish kind of work from home situation to 100% work from home situation. But it's been a challenge, like, across the board, and we've definitely seen this across our customers and across the industry as a whole. So from that perspective, it's been a challenge. It's been a challenge for everyone who had to implement this, and it's been a challenge for us scaling up. But I think overall we managed this quite well so far.
Well, what were some of the security implications? Of course, we've seen others in this space become under the microscope of security. What were some of your major concerns as this was unfolding from a security perspective?
So I think what's really interesting is that the overall threat landscape, as I see it, really hasn't changed that much. I mean, we're still seeing the same kind of threat actors. We're still seeing the same kind of TTPs being used across the board. So that really hasn't changed that significantly. The social engineering clickbait is obviously different right now, and I think what's in particularly interesting is that for the first time that I can remember, is like everybody has been using the exact same clickbait. It's all about COVID-19 and not about taxes or elections or all the things that we used to see before. The threat surface or the exposed kind of situation there definitely has changed. So like we have now a lot of folks working from home, not necessarily having direct communications to their respective IT departments in order to ask for help or ask for questions. We've seen unpatched routers. We've seen things that definitely can pose a security risk across this environment. And all of this being outside of our direct control, it's hard to work with this. At the same time, I think one of the things that really has worked well for us internally as a company is that we have significantly invested into moving ourselves into zero trust or a very SaaS-centric kind of environment. So it's like putting the right controls in place, relying heavily on identity as a service in order to make sure we have single sign-on, multi-factor, all that kind of good fun stuff. Really helps us to keep those kind of things together and move forward. That is obviously something that not every company can engage. We've definitely seen this in the industry and heard about it. It's like where we have companies that heavily rely on on-premise environments, have challenges scaling up their VPNs, making sure that their VPNs are actually secure, making sure that those the external surface is actually properly protected. And I think that is still something that is going on, although I have a feeling that the bulk of the ramp up really has done quite well.
Yeah, it's interesting. It seems that with the shift to work from home, we put now, I don't know if it's different security requirements, but a higher priority of those security requirements on all the software we use, and have all these expectations of, is it encrypted? Is it encrypted in transit? Is it encrypted at rest? Does it offer these other security controls to protect whatever I'm doing? Those were already there. Is this just a ramp up from those requirements?
I would say that it's like awareness of this really has now come to the come to the forefront. All of those kind of discussions we've been having in the past, and I think a lot of people, especially software service companies, have been really thinking about this hard. Some harder than others, grant you that. But I think the situation that we're in right now, and the kind of things that have happened over the last couple of years, have brought a lot of the security concerns and issues now more to the forefront than they happened before. We're really exposed, and I think one of the things that people are starting to understand is that we truly rely on communications to be in place in order to perform critical business processes to actually do our jobs. So it's like the security, availability, confidentiality, integrity of all those kind of communication services is now more critical than ever, because it's no longer possible to just holler across the aisle and say like, hey, can you help me with this, Joey?
Yeah, when we want to have that confidential meeting, we can't go find a conference room, right? Because
Exactly.
we're not in the office together. So we put those now, security and privacy and integrity, like you said, and all of those things into our software now, which is really kind of forcing everyone to raise the bar of the security of your software.
Absolutely, 100%. And so I think one of the things that has been always very important to me in my role and for LogMeIn as a company is we really feel that we have to earn and maintain the trust that our customers put in us. At the end of the day, there's critical business processes like communications, like voice over IP, or things like LastPass, where we actually store your account credentials with us. All of those things are in our hands, and it's like earning that trust, maintaining a high degree of transparency in terms of like what's going on, and then maintaining it as such, I think is ultimately extremely important for us, because otherwise there is no chance that we can really go on with our business.
Mm.
Gerald, when we think about your staff from a security perspective, what are some of the challenges and how are they able to perform their role in this new remote environment? I don't know how many of your security staff was remote before versus now, but can you talk a little bit about kind of the changes and challenges within your team structure of how do you monitor in this new environment?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. I think what you made a good point is like we have already been before a quite distributed team. So it's like I have folks in Santa Barbara, I have them in Utah, in Boston, in Quebec, in Germany, in Hungary, and in India as well. So it's quite a distribution across the globe, and we always had challenges in order to make sure that we coordinate correctly, communicate well with each other. But obviously, this new situation has brought some interesting new challenges. So what I would say is like has been probably one of the more challenging kind of environments or challenging kind of situations is that we have a security operations center that literally operates 24/7. So I have 3 shifts: morning, evening, and night shifts. And what we've seen is like if you have a few folks sitting in a SOC like that are working together at 2:00 in the morning, they can keep each other entertained. They can keep going on, and it's much more effective than sitting at home all by yourself, maybe over a GoToMeeting in order to talk to each other occasionally, but really being much more isolated. There's a lot of things from a people perspective that really need to be addressed, and we've been trying to do this with virtual cafes, with like just calling in at the night and from other parts of the world in order to make sure that everybody is still okay. And I think that is something that is sometimes missed a little bit. Even if you are in a strong work from home environment, you're still alone by yourself often enough. And it's like if you don't get that kind of human connection and continue to keep going with this human connection, it's very easily end up getting stir crazy.
I bet. What about effectiveness? I mean, how effective are they VPNing back into some of the systems that are on-prem to do their daily, kind of normal tasks? Or have you had to try to augment some of that from an efficiency perspective because you're not in the SOC anymore.
Yeah, I think dashboarding is like really working with the single pane of glass. It's like we all know how that looks. It's a bunch of monitors. It's like that's obviously not the same that we had before. But like I said, it's like we have a lot of those things already structured in such a way that we have a zero trust kind of access to the majority of those systems. We do have some systems that are still on-prem, so they do require VPN. But we've been also working across the entire workforce really to make sure that only those that actually need to dial in through the VPN actually do and preserve bandwidth where we need it. And so far, that's been going actually quite well. So at the end of the day, I think we're in a pretty decent situation from that perspective. Like I said, some of the collaboration communications across situations, across continents can be challenging. But I think the work effectiveness of everyone involved so far has been really just as good as I could have expected. I think it's like if we continue doing things for much longer the way we are, we may need to reassess the situation a little bit and see whether we can make some evolutionary changes. But so far, it seems to be good.
We covered an article earlier, Gerald, that said that there's a large percentage of enterprises that are reshifting the focus from their InfoSec people over back to IT because the InfoSec people have some of those same skills to be able to build out VPNs and infrastructure. Do you have concerns over that? Are you doing some of that internally, or like how are you managing your resources?
So the key element there is that we've set up the security team here at LogMeIn truly as a second and third line of defense organization. So we are looking at things from a architecture perspective, design, controls, risk, ultimately then audit, and really have a strong separation between the operational teams that are sitting in the first line, hands on keyboard, driving things. Mm-hmm. I think that kind of model has been proven to be extremely effective, at least for us. We have strong security expertise on my team. We really have folks being able to advise and guide the operational teams with regards to what needs to be done, and sometimes even help in surging, right? So if there is a concrete need to, say, surge on firewall configurations and updates and optimizations, my team can definitely help out with that. But we do try to keep a little bit of a distance between those things in order to make sure that we have multiple sets of eyes on this. Because I think one of the things where you can always have a pretty significant shortcoming or fallacy or like security gap is if you really just look at this through a single view from a single point of view. It's like from an operational point of view or only from a risk point of view, you start to miss out on things. So it's like maintaining this going forward is, I think, critically important. The company has been super supportive from that perspective, so I couldn't have really asked for more. But I think it's definitely something to keep an eye on, even though we do shift resources around, obviously, to help out.
Mm. I want to change gears a little bit and ask you about your evaluation processes for security solutions. I think it's still one of the number one things that we struggle with in enterprise security today. What is your advice for how you should recommend that folks evaluate security solutions, such as endpoint security tends to be a very difficult one?
I think you really need to, there's a bunch of things that you really need to take into consideration. I think you need to first start to get clarity yourself about what your requirements are and what your stakeholders' requirements are as well. Because at the end of the day, it's like if you deploy an endpoint solution into an IT environment or into a production environment, like in our case, say GoToMeeting or so, and you introduce more churn and more harm than you ultimately get out of it, nobody wins, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like working closely with stakeholders up front as you start to engage in such a project, I think is critical in order to look at the success. Having those kind of requirements, criteria sorted out, making sure that there's really a good and clear understanding and also project plan that ultimately can be executed really allows you then in terms of like going into the proof of concept phase. And I think developing a good proof of concept for a smaller environment that is not necessarily critical for business delivery should be an absolute prerequisite for whatever you do. Mm. It's like you cannot really garner the right kind of understanding how a particular solution, endpoint, identity governance, GRC tools, how all of those kind of things actually perform in your environment without testing it out. Once you've done that, it's like you hopefully have a short list of like 2-3 kind of solutions that really are appealing to everyone who needs to be working with, and then it comes down to negotiations, right? I mean, it's like we're a commercial company. We have to optimize our resources and our budget as well, and I think that's really where the final decision often then is taken. There are lots of great solutions out there. It's like you got to find what works and then really cut it down to what you can afford.
Yeah, and there's definitely a trend in that last part of, does it make good fiscal sense, right? And we've seen a lot of security vendors changing their pricing and packaging models to accommodate just that point right there.
Totally. I think what's really also interesting in this kind of context, particularly when you look at pricing, is in how far you can benefit from a single vendor kind of suite versus like best of breed. It's like we have I mean, generally I like to have as little vendors in my company, in programs as possible, because it's a single throat to choke. Makes it a lot easier. There's also good economies of scale in terms of like really looking at a bunch of different things. But at the same time, it's like there are vendors that are better in one thing or another. So it may be worthwhile departing from that strategy as well. I would say it's like the smaller the company, the more you want to really try to focus on a single vendor kind of a stack kind of strategy, simply because you really end up having to train people on multiple kind of products, multiple kind of like product philosophies, really. And that can be very difficult and resource intensive. So it probably depends a little bit in terms of like where you are in the maturity of the company and also the size of your team.
How are you managing and recommend others manage their vulnerability management programs, especially in this time? Now you've got people working from home. You've got IT and security staff that are basically, firefighting, but also may have a shift in focus. So how do you come back and say, well, now we need to roll out this patch to all of our users who are working from home? We've got COVID-19 phishing emails and all this other stuff going on. How are you dealing with that situation?
Would you like at the prioritization or with regards to like how we do the mechanics? It's like so
prioritization I think is important, and then how do you balance the need to push out a patch with the danger that it might cause adverse harm with everyone working from home, where you can't send out a technician to go fix someone's PC easily?
Yeah, so prioritization, I think we kind of stick to our guns there a little bit. It's like we do always, with any kind of patch that comes out, we obviously rely initially on the vendor recommendations. Is something critical? Is something a high risk or a high concern kind of vulnerability? And then build our own kind of like justification from that. Obviously, if we don't use certain products or use certain aspects of products, we may postpone patches that address highly critical vulnerabilities. Well, if you're not using them, it's like why really push this? So this same kind of like prioritization process that we have in place for in a normal kind of situation still takes place. It sometimes is a little bit slower just because of the communication time differences and gaps. But I think we still can we're still very comfortably within our overall SLAs. When it comes to like assessing the potential impact of a patch, obviously that's part of the overall risk classification that we come up with ourselves. So it's like there are test runs for this. For the majority of our corporate environment, we are in a fairly good situation that our IT team has an extremely well-defined kind of patching process. There's automated patching going on based on the findings with regards to the impact of those patches, and we have the necessary tools in house actually through things like Rescue or Go to Assist that really allow our IT team to back out patches if something goes wrong on individual systems. So I think it's like being prepared from an IT environment to really have remote support tools at hand is something that makes that is now more important than ever. And the easier those can be used also by the end user, are activated by the end users, the more efficient the IT department can be down the road.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that regardless of the times, right, being able to remotely support folks gives you those capabilities to be able to roll out a patch because you can go to that user's workstation, even if they're not in the office. It's a great point.
Absolutely.
Gerald, does product security for LogMeIn also fall under your group, or is that a separate group, or how does that work?
We have it all. It's like one of the philosophies that we do subscribe to is that adversaries do not necessarily make a difference between corporate and product systems. So it's like we try to really centralize things as much as possible. There's also good economy of scale when it comes to that as well. Like I said before, it's like we are taking a little bit of a second line of defense role there. So we're providing the frameworks. We're providing we're assisting with defining the necessary controls that need to be put in place. We own the secure development lifecycle that every single product team implements across the organization. We drive through that. It's like threat modeling. We drive static and dynamic analysis. We drive a very, very strong security champion program that I'm extremely proud of the team having put together. And but we are not necessarily like a hands-on keyboard, so to speak, in terms of like implementing new security features or directly working on security bugs. Sometimes we do in order to help folks, particularly when it comes to things like encryption or other security-sensitive kind of technologies. There's definitely multiple sets of eyes on that to make sure that we're really addressing things the right way and we're not just looking down a single lane. And we also have some organizations within LogMeIn that have actually dedicated security teams that work very closely with us as well. So as you can imagine, LastPass, for example, they have their own security lane that really drives deep into the product security itself and makes sure that they do their own part of the work as well. For me, it really comes back. It's like having as many eyes on this problem as possible in order to make sure that we can deliver a premium product.
Gerald, security champions, what is that, and how have you implemented that in your organization?
Sure. So security champions are really engineers, developers, or infrastructure engineers that are usually working in product development, product maintenance, operations, et cetera, but haven't expressed an interest in terms of participating in the security champion program. The security champion program has different kind of training opportunities, monthly meetings, special articles that can be written or consumed, training opportunities for pen testing and hacking, and those kind of things. And it's really something that augments the regular workload of someone who's sitting in a product team. What it allows us to do from a security team perspective is really engage deeply with every single team across the entire enterprise and make sure that we understand what their concerns are, how effective some of our controls are actually working, what we can do to improve on our side, but also getting a sense in terms of like how far the threat modeling has come, how good we are in terms of meeting the SLAs across our security bugs that we identified. And it's like driving this program, keeping it light, keeping it somewhat gamified. They're winners. It's like you can earn different ranks in the security champion programs with additional privileges. All those things really help to foster a culture of security throughout the organization that really is necessary in order to drive it. Because at the end of the day, it's like we can talk as much about technology or processes that we want to implement. If we do not get folks on board with regards to like driving security for us within the organization and sometimes even outside, we lose out. And it's like this is really one of our best ways in terms of like maintaining this kind of ongoing dialogue and making sure that we're hitting the right mark and the product teams are too.
I love that it's a formal program, because sometimes I think of security champions as this kind of like grassroots movement, but the fact that you've made it a formal program and not too formal, like you said, right? It's kind of an informal thing. You have meetings. There's a gamification of it. There's training opportunities. That's some great advice for folks out there. I love it.
Thank you.
Matt.
Thank you. No, it's definitely a great success across the board. It's like, and the team likes it. I think most of the folks attending like it. And at the end of the day, it's also something that is really great for the product, for product management and the product teams themselves. Because at the end of the day, they know they can sleep better. It's like they know that they have a not a small group of folks that can really help with fixing security issues as you go along.
That's awesome. Yeah. Matt, sorry, final questions?
Yeah, one final question, Gerald. I mean, as we think about the environment we're in, what's kind of your strategy and plan to go back on-prem and back into the office? Have you thought about kind of what that plan looks like for you? Any tips or tricks for others out there that have to go through this transition from remote back to on-premise?
Oh boy, hot off the presses. I mean, that is obviously a corporate decision that is not directly driven by the security team, but by the entire enterprise. I think we are, from a business continuity perspective, doing already the right things. We're looking at what is the situation on the ground in the different areas that we're active in. We're looking into best practices that we see other companies implementing, and also basing our strategy on recommendations from the right health professionals in terms of moving forward. I don't necessarily see that we're going to see a date where the governmental restrictions are going to be lifted and everybody flocking back into the office writ large. I do think that, and it was an interesting article that our CEO recently wrote, that we don't necessarily want to be at a new normal, but at a better normal going forward. I think there's the flexibility. What we see now is like, even with a 100% work from home employee base, we can still be very effective as a company and do pretty much everything that we're doing right now. And I think that kind of flexibility is also something that we've seen employees love as well. So going forward, what I can definitely see in the making is there's a certain kind of like more measured approach with regards to assessing the kind of risks that would be associated with a full return to the office. And then maybe going forward, seeing as like in how far we can also be a little bit more flexible for our employees to sometimes work from home when they would like to, or where it would make sense. We have been doing this in the past as well. So it's like, again, it's like for Log Me In, for us, it's not necessarily being something that we just suddenly got surprised with. We have a pretty strong remote workforce culture. There's a lot of things that need to be taken into consideration when you want to build this, especially how can you reach and include those kind of remote employees in your corporate events and corporate activities when they're really not like physically present on a day-to-day basis. But I feel with our past experience and with the work that we're doing right now, we're on the right track.
Fantastic. Gerald, thank you so much for appearing on Enterprise Security Weekly. And keep up the great work, because we use your products here at Security Weekly. So thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Paul. Much appreciated. Thanks for having me, and good luck with the show. Thank you.
With that, we'll take a short break, come back with our final interview for the show with Wim Reams. Stay tuned.